The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field, which a person finds and hides again, and out of joy goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. When he finds a pearl of great price, he goes and sells all that he has and buys it." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Jesus Christ.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution published a story about the original Star of David sapphire in its May 17, 1987 issue. A gemstone collector named Rob Coochall owned a little roadside shop outside Andrews, North Carolina. Like many in the trade, he hunted for precious stones, then sold them to collectors or jewelry makers. Although he was not an expert, he knew enough about valuable rocks to decide which to pick up and sell and which to leave in the road. He usually left the appraising of his rocks to the experts. Although he enjoyed the work, it didn't always pay his bills. Hence, occasionally, he had to cut firewood and sell it to add to his income. 20 years ago, while on a dig, Rob found a shining blue rock he described as purty and big. Rob found a shining blue rock, and he unsuccessfully tried to sell the specimen, and according to the story in the journal, kept the rock under his bed. At last, he sold it for less than $500 to pay his power bill, which was long overdue. Now known as the Star of David sapphire, it weighs nearly a pound and is worth $3 million. That's purty. Today's gospel is found only in St. Matthew, and it truly is a treasure in that it's located in that all-important chapter 13 of Matthew's gospel. That's where Matthew will stuff most of his parables that Jesus gives us. And this passage has been a source of puzzlement to people throughout the centuries, because as one student questioned one time when I was teaching this parable, he said, "Is Jesus advocating dishonesty?" And I looked at him, and he must have thought I thought he was a candidate for a psych center. You know, Jesus was sinless. Why would he want to teach us dishonesty? He gave his life for the good. Well, the question is this. The opening parable, we're told a man is somewhere out in ancient Palestine, and he's digging in the ground for some reason. We don't know why, but at one point he unearths treasure. We don't know what exactly it is. Was it gold? Was it gems? We don't know. It was treasure. It was very valuable. The man recognizes its value. He decides to sell everything he has and to buy that field so that he will own that treasure. Now, where people get the idea of the dishonesty, they think, well, why did he go tell the property owner that I found some treasure under your property? You want to keep it or not? That's beyond the scope of the message. What was the treasure doing in the ground to begin with? You see, in ancient Palestine, something that we've never had to worry about here in America, thank God, to our strong military. But back then, almost every other generation had to deal with a new conquering army coming on the scene. They came all the time. It seems like the ancient Israelites were being conquered generation after generation after generation. And the problem was this. They didn't have iPods back then. Can you imagine that? And so if a conquering army was coming in your direction, you usually found out with somebody screaming, you know, they're coming, or you saw the dust cloud in the distance, and you might imagine you didn't have a long period of time to get out of town. And please note, There did not exist at the time the First National Bank of Jerusalem. There were no safety deposit boxes. So what did these poor people do? Well, when you saw the foreigners coming, you dug a hole, and if it was important to you, you stuck it in the ground and covered it up and hoped that you survived the invasion, number one. And if you survived the invasion, you would be able to come back and find out where you hid it and then reclaim it. Well, for whatever reason, this guy finds this treasure, and what Jesus is making the point about is this. He knew it was of value, and he sold everything to go after it. The second parable is very clear, very commonsensical. Jesus said there was a merchant one time, and merchants are in business to make money, as we all know. He was looking for a pearl. Maybe he had a client that was willing to pay big bucks for a good pearl. But whatever the case may be, he found the pearl that he could sell. And he sold everything that he owned and bought just that pearl. Now, those in finances could say, well, that was kind of crazy on his part, very imprudent. Why do you want to put all your eggs in one basket? That's beyond the scope of the parable. The fact is, the man was looking for something valuable. He found it. And he was willing to do anything to get it. And he did. The message of the parables is pure and simple. We would do anything for what we consider treasure in this life. In fact, in chapter 6, verse 21 of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus will put it another way. He says, where your treasure is, there also will your heart be. What's the point of this passage for us? We are called to examine what is of value to us in this life. What is most valuable to you in this life? What's most important? Now, a lot of people would say, I'm sure, well, my goodness, Father Jim, it's my children. My children are priceless. And the Roman Catholic Church would say, absolutely. One of the reasons we are so pro-life is we see human life as a gift from God, and especially in its most vulnerable forms, the unborn. Children are precious gifts from God. But the problem is, do we really own them? See, there's a pronoun that we learned when the time we were in preschool. And that pronoun is my, or mine, its cousin. And we tend to put the word my or mine in front of everything that we consider of value, including our children. Now, according to the laws of the land, absolutely. You bring children in this world, you are responsible for those children. Under the law, those children are your children until they become of legal independent age. But are they really mine? Very often I see parents, and through my 31 years of Catholic education, who possess their children. And here's what happens. I take little Susie or little Mary or little Billy to the best tutors in the world. I take them, they want to take up a music instrument, I take them to the best musician in the world to teach them how to play the flute or the piano or whatever the case may be. I take them to gymnastic classes, dance classes, and sometimes for some parents it's the fantasy I have of my child being a great dancer or a great actor that motivates me to take them to the best for the best lessons and everything. But that doesn't guarantee a certain outcome. I can send my kid to the best school in the world, but that does not guarantee a certain outcome. Very often we forget one important thing about parenting, and that is it's not just nurturing, it's also nature too. Children have precious and unique personalities. No two of your children in the same family are the same. And so very often we try to look for a guaranteed outcome. If I take them to the best lessons, put them in the best school, give them the best opportunities, therefore they will end up perfect. And it just doesn't work out that way all the time, does it? I was sharing with the people this weekend a story about a guy with whom I went to high school by the name of Johnny. His parents were of Greek descent, and they owned a small and very successful business back in Logan. Johnny was an only child. They wanted the best for Johnny, as most parents want the best for their children. And so when Johnny turned 16, Johnny informed them that he wanted a car, but not just any car. Johnny wanted a purple Plymouth Roadrunner. Now, how many of you dinosaurs remember the Plymouth Roadrunner from back in the 1970s? Okay, for you kiddos, it was a snazzy-looking automobile. In fact, it kind of looked like the Batmobile. It had a big fin in the back. Johnny's father even paid extra money to make sure the dealer would not bring another purple Roadrunner into the area within the first year. So there was Johnny sporting around town, laying a lot of rubber on the highways with his brand new purple Roadrunner. And one of the things that Johnny did, Johnny got a lot of girls interested in Johnny. A lot of girls were interested in Johnny, in fact. One came from Kentucky to see Johnny as much as she could get her car to come and see him. Johnny would get the girl pregnant. The mother, Johnny's mother, would drive the girl to an abortion mill in Kentucky so that she could have an abortion. Why? Because she was unfit for her son. And that's exactly how it came down. So the parents would die. They would leave the family business to Johnny. Johnny would not finish college. Johnny decided to take over the business. And evidently, at some point while being in this business, Johnny decided that it did not produce income at the level that he needed it. And so Johnny began selling crack cocaine. He was a distributor, a middle-level distributor. The FBI caught up with Johnny. Johnny is currently doing time in federal prison for major crack cocaine distribution. All the money the parents left him, the home, the property, the business, is all gone in order to pay his fines and his debt that he owes society. When Johnny leaves prison, Johnny will be broke. Isn't it interesting? He had the best of everything. They were viciously defensive of their boy. Johnny did not work out according to plans. So, what do parents need to succeed? Stay with me, the answer is coming. But what about our children? Aren't they treasure? Of course they are. But one thing we have to remember in this life, we do not own our children. Children are a gift that comes from God. How long you have them in this life, none of us knows. 5 years, 6 months, 20 years, 30 years. We do not know. They are on loan. So if our children are our treasure and our only treasure, we're going to be disappointed because at some point in time, parents have to say goodbye. We have to take our last breath in this life. Reputation. Many people through the years have told me their good name is their treasure. It's so important to them. They work hard to build up a good name. And certainly having a good reputation is important. How many of you know the name Jonas Salk? Okay, did you see how many people don't know Jonas Salk? Jonas Salk invented the vaccine for polio. I'm aware there are a lot of people in this church today who have no clue what polio is. My cousin, who's in her late 60s, developed polio as a child. She was crippled her entire life. Fortunately, because of Dr. Salk's work, and he only died in 1995, by the way, he developed a vaccine. We went to the public grade schools on an announced day, and we got a sugar cube with a little pink dot on it. And they told us if you eat that sugar cube, you won't have polio. And none of us did who did that. But my point is this. There are already people who have forgotten about Dr. Jonas Salk. What about you and your good name? How long will your reputation last in this life? To your children, for sure. Your grandchildren, for sure. And maybe, you might live long enough to know your great-grandchildren. But beyond that, guess what? Unless one of your great-great-great-grandchildren are doing research on the family tree, they will never know who you are. All that you did, all that you accumulated, all the hard work, everything is bye-bye when you take your last breath. So there's got to be something more important than your reputation. Money. Money is the treasure. There was an investment banker who shared with me a couple years ago when the economy tanked, when it went south. And I'll never forget his prophecy. He said to me, Father Jim, I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm going to make a prediction. Within the next year or so, your church is going to be packed every Sunday. He said, because the economy is going to get so bad that the people who have invested so much in money and material things are going to say, this ain't the answer. There's got to be something more. Well, guess what? Except for Christmas and Easter, the churches haven't been running over with people. There's no mass exodus or gathering of people into the churches anywhere. So money becomes a real source of treasure. But is it? So we work hard, and I am a capitalist. I believe you should get what you earn in this life. And hard work is very important. And so you work hard to amass whatever amount of money that you do. For some people, it's a fortune. For some people, it's less. But then what happens when you take your last breath? Well, I'll leave my money in a foundation or a trust for my kids. For those of you who are not aware of that financial tool, the lawyers came up with that a number of years ago. And basically what it says is you can put your money in an account, and what happens is when you die, the principal remains intact, and your children or your beneficiaries, whomever they may be, live off the interest income. At some point in time, they can take it all if you choose to do that. The wording is dependent upon your desires. But my point is this. We leave this world with a significant foundation set up, presuming that we're going to leave this money that'll come in every month or once a year for our children. But what's to guarantee you that they're going to spend it prudently and wisely? How many times have we all heard stories about kids who squandered the family estate? So what happens to our money? When you take your last breath, it's no longer your concern. It doesn't matter. So what does matter? What's the real treasure in this life? You know, when you've lived a number of years, you really start to ask that question. Last year when I turned 56, I made a statement that just came out of my mouth almost spontaneously. I hadn't thought about it before then, but it came out. And once it came out, I've started repeating it several times. And my statement was this. Someone said to me, "What's it like being 56, Father Jim?" And my statement was, I've come to realize that I've got more years behind me than I have ahead of me. And you know, the truth of the matter, anybody can say that. That little beautiful child over there could leave this church, go out into 60, get hit by a car, and that's it. She may have more years behind her than she has ahead of her. None of us knows, do we? We just don't know. But I know in my case, there are probably more behind me than there are ahead of me. And so I have to ask myself, what is important? If I'm going to leave this life, what is going to be that which is true treasure? And the bottom line is your faith. Your faith is your ticket that gets you to the other side. Your faith that was given to you by the Lord and something that hopefully you've been working at your entire life is what gets you to the other side. When you come and stand before Jesus on Judgment Day, he's not going to look and ask you, what was the sum total of the foundation that you left your kids? He's not going to ask you that. He's going to ask you questions such as, when did you see me hungry and feed me? When did you see me naked and clothe me? Or the big question is, did you love the way I taught you to love? That's what our judgment's going to be about. And so if our faith is what gets us to the other side, why are we not wise enough to recognize its value and work at getting it? And that's not all. Faith is important for this side. You want to do something important for your children? The Family Research Council, and I encourage you to go online and look at their studies. They have studied extensively the past 10 years the impact of faith on the family. It will shock you in terms of the outcome. In terms of bullying, less incidences of bullying, less incidences of premature sexuality, less incidences of drug and alcohol abuse, and so on and so on. We have data, good, solid research, which tells us that faith is a contributing factor to successful and healthy children. It's not a certitude issue, because children have a nature too. But the odds are extremely high that if faith is a part of their culture, if they've been living faith, then they're going to do well in this life. But what's most important is not just what they do in this life, in the life that never ends. So my brothers and sisters, I don't mean to depress you, and I hope I haven't, but if you do feel uncomfortable, that's the message of the gospel. What's your treasure today? What do you see as the most important? Once you identify that, and we already know what the answer is thanks to Jesus, and the question is, what are you willing to do to hold on to it?